Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. Today's special guest is former Collingwood and Gold Coast Suns player Josh Fraser. So hello, Josh. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Fletch. Thanks for having me on.
It is a great honour to have you on the program. Which team did you support when you were growing up as a child and why?
I supported Geelong as a kid. I don't actually know the reason why I started supporting Geelong. I think it may have had something to do with, some of their success through the 90s, playing off in grand finals. Obviously, they had some fantastic players as well. Was a big Geelong supporter growing up. And then, I guess once I was drafted, that changed pretty quickly.
What was it like growing up in Mansfield in the Victorian High Country, and how was your junior football career?
Firstly, I love growing up in Mansfield. It's just a fantastic country town. We were a little bit out of the town centre itself, so we were probably maybe 12, 15 k's out of town on a farm. So just a fantastic lifestyle to grow up in for a young person, and obviously heavily involved with the football club through the junior ranks, and played all my junior footy at Mansfield. Obviously went to school with a lot of the guys that I played footy with, and looking back, they are some of the best moments of my time playing football. When you play with your mates, there's not a lot of pressure and expectation. You basically go out there and have a kick and try and enjoy yourself as much as you can. But look, I was like, so many other kids back then that, so very much sports orientated. And, again, growing up in Mansfield was a fantastic thing for me. I loved every minute of it, and being involved at the Mansfield Footy Club through the junior ranks was also a really important part of my journey.
Yeah, it's not everyone gets the opportunity to grow up on a farm, so that would have been a fantastic life experience for you. Was it always a dream of yours to play AFL football?
Yeah, it was, Fletch. I'd always, again, for whatever reason, just fell in love with football. I mean, I loved all sports, but football was my number one, probably, closely followed by basketball. And, I'm a big fan of American sports as well, the NFL, the NBA, baseball. But, football for me was the number one sport growing up. I guess from a reasonably early age, I really had that goal and ambition, or probably dream back then, to want to play AFL football. And, my weekends were just consumed with watching as much football as I could. If I wasn't playing junior football on any given day, I'd be, outside kicking the footy. But again, growing up in a country town and being involved at the football club, more often than not, you spend so much of your week, and certainly your weekends, at the footy club itself. So, a Saturday, for example, you might play the early game, but you'd be there till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, watching the under-18s, watching the reserves, watching the seniors. So I really immersed myself in footy. I loved every part about it growing up. And, I always had that dream of wanting to be an AFL player.
I guess a lot of people in Victoria are immersed with football, but what was it like being the number one draft pick, and what was the pressure like of being the number one pick?
Well, firstly, it was an enormous thrill and privilege. I guess if I think back, there was a hell of a lot of work that was put into getting drafted, and not only on my behalf, because, you do have to dedicate yourself from a reasonably early age if you if you want to play league football, you probably don't get to do some of the things that your mates might be doing, but that's all part and parcel of it. But also the commitment that my parents had as well. I mean, playing local footy in Mansfield was one thing, but if you're lucky enough to make representative squads, eventually for me it was playing for the Murray Bushrangers. There was a fair bit of travel involved. We were travelling at least 2 times a week, probably an hour and a half to training. That's a big sacrifice for parents and, and obviously has an effect on your other siblings as well. So it was a great thrill to be drafted. Fantastic. I got to share that moment with my family and friends. And then I guess it was a realisation that there was a lot of hard work in front of me. It was one thing to get drafted, but the next part of the task was to try and carve out a career at AFL level. So initially, I didn't necessarily feel too much pressure. I think I was probably a little bit naive, which wasn't a bad thing. But I guess, maybe 2 or 3 years into my career, I really started to feel that pressure of being a number 1 pick and the expectations around performance. And, no different to probably what most players go through. But certainly if you're an early draft pick, that pressure can be ramped up a little bit.
You definitely do have pressure associated with being a number 1 draft pick. And of course, last year, you were involved at the Carlton Football Club as a development coach. What was it like watching the number 1 draft pick, Sam Walsh, and how do you think he differentiates himself from the other number 1 draft picks within the AFL?
It's a difficult question to answer, how he differentiates himself. I guess, I can only speak about what I observed with Walshy, and he's probably one of the more ready-made AFL players to step into the league. I mean, he was number 1 pick, but whether he was taken number 1 or in the top 10, I mean, he was physically ready-made to adapt to the game at AFL level. He's got such a great temperament. He's from a fantastic family. I think he approaches the game the right way. He's very diligent in his preparation. He works extremely hard. I was fortunate enough to witness him, and also Jacob Wiedering coming into Carlton whilst I was there, watching him go about his footy as well. And he probably had some early struggles, but I think the resilience he's been able to build and the way he's developed and gone about his football has been nothing short of impressive. So, I guess players all handle it a little bit differently. Walsh is in his 2nd year, potentially he might have some more difficult times ahead. I don't know, but certainly on the current evidence, both of those guys have approached their number 1 status really well. And probably something that, if I had my time again, I would probably have done things a little bit differently. But, you're going back 20 years now, so the guys coming through in this day and age are a lot better equipped.
Yeah, they definitely are. Sam Walsh and Jacob Wiedering are 2 fantastic players for the Carlton Football Club. Of course, you played 21 games in your debut season. What would have been the greatest moment in your first season of AFL football?
Greatest moment would definitely have been my first game. I remember we played Hawthorn at the MCG, and not only was it my first game, but I think there was a number of players. Leon Davis at the time was there, Ben Johnson. There was a number of us that had been drafted at the end of 1999 that got to share our first game together. We had Mick Muldes as a new coach at Collingwood. So there was a lot of excitement around the place at that time. And I still remember my first game really well. Getting the victory against Hawthorn was really important. And then I guess after the first game, it became a little bit of a blur. But having been able to carve out 21 games in my first year was something that I'm proud of. But I guess again, if I look back, I probably didn't have the depth on the list at that stage where someone was going to take my spot, because I probably wasn't performing at the level I could have or should have been. But again, that's all situation and scenario based. At that time, the Pies didn't have a lot of ruckmen around, and it was just a role I had to assume. So, but certainly the first game was was a memory that I've still got. And as I said, it was great to share it with a number of players playing their first game also.
Of course, you mentioned Michael Muldes. What was it like being coached by Michael Muldes? Of course, he's one of the greatest AFL coaches of all time. Can you give us into a little bit of insight into what Michael was like?
Well, he commanded a lot of respect, Mick. I mean, he had a fantastic record behind him when he arrived at Collingwood. I think the other thing that potentially gets missed at times is that he was in charge of, I guess, overhauling the culture of the footy club, and not that the culture was horrible. I think Tony Shaw was coached before Mick, who'd done a fantastic job, but I think the list needed a lot of work. Mick certainly come in and he'd had that success as a coach, so he had an idea of what he wanted and how things should look. So, we won our first 7 games from memory in the year 2000, and then we unfortunately didn't win too many after that in our first year. But he came in and had a real impact. He's got a presence about him, a really strong presence, Mick. He can be really demanding. He can also show a great deal of empathy and support. He was absolutely the right person at that time to guide a young group of players. And I think the results speak for themselves. Getting the club into a grand final in 2002 and 2003, speaks volumes of the type of coach he was.
Yeah, he was one of the greatest coaches of all time, like I mentioned. Looking back at your AFL career, did you feel unfulfilled by the fact that you never won a premiership?
100%. Absolutely. For some reason, this topic's come up a little bit in the last few years. And, on a personal level, I did feel unfulfilled. And I probably look at my career and, I'm not completely satisfied. I was able to, I guess, get the most out of myself for various reasons. And I guess one thing when you retire that you want to feel connected to something, and, not having played in a premiership probably leaves that empty feeling around your playing days. And that's not to say you're not connected to teammates and past coaches and those sorts of people, but obviously a premiership is something that forever and a day you are connected to a footy club with. And, to miss out on that was, looking back, was really unfulfilling and disappointing. And they're really hard to win. They're hard enough to get to, but they're hard enough to win. Having missed out in 2002, 2003, and then being at the club in 2010 but not playing, I'd be lying if I said that didn't leave a little bit of an empty feeling of unfulfillment when I look back on my career.
Yeah, of course, a lot of the AFL players all want to win premierships. Who would have been the top 5 teammates that you played with at the Collingwood Football Club?
Top 5 teammates. I was so fortunate to have played with some fantastic players. It's probably hard to filter them into 5, but I'll give you some names. I mean, obviously Nathan Buckley was in some ways ahead of his time with his professionalism and the way he approached the game. Probably carried the load of expectation on his shoulders of a whole football club for so long. So he was fantastic. Anthony Rocker is someone that doesn't get a lot of mentions when people talk about great players, but I thought he was arguably our best player when he was up and going. He was so influential on games, had a massive presence, could take a mark and kick a goal like no one I'd seen. So he was a fantastic teammate. I love playing with Scotty Burns. I thought Scotty Burns, again, probably falls into the underrated category, but he was so tough, so hard, had an outstanding leadership presence about him. He was someone that I really admired as a teammate. Paul Akuri is another one. Worked extremely hard. I think people probably would say that Paul wasn't the most gifted in terms of talent, but for the talent he had, he absolutely maximised it with his work ethic and dedication. And he was just an outstanding teammate. James Clement was another one, so honest and reliable as a defender. Simon Prestigiacomo. And Shane O'Brien. Shane O'Brien was a fantastic player as well. He was very underrated at Collingwood. So his ability to go into the midfield and win clearances and set up play was outstanding. So, that's probably more of the older crew. But again, I was lucky enough to play with Scotty Pendlebury, who's probably arguably going to go down as one of Collingwood's greats. So, wide range of players, very hard to filter it into five. But, I think I've given you a pretty good snapshot that, the footy club over the journey have had some champions.
Yeah, they definitely are some of the superstars of the AFL. And, of course, Scott Pendlebury will be playing his 314th game on Monday night. So we wish Scott all the very best with that. Who would have been the funniest teammate that you got to play with in your AFL career, and why?
Funniest teammate? That's a tough question. Funniest teammate? We used to get a lot of laughs from Simon Prestigiacomo. Now, I don't know if he was the funniest in terms of what he said, but he was so quiet and unassuming. When he did speak, it was often met with loud applause. But he's an outstanding person, Presty. He's another guy I just love playing alongside. Shane O'Brien was funny. Enjoyed my time with him. Andrew Williams is a guy that wasn't at Collingwood that long. He came across from West Coast. I'm very good mates with him. And, he's a guy that when we get together, we often have a good laugh. So, probably those three. But, again, very difficult to filter it down to one.
Yeah, because football clubs are all made up of humour. There are definitely close connections. What was the toughest part of your AFL career, Josh?
Toughest part of my AFL career, I guess. Injuries are tough for anyone. I don't think I had any more or less injuries than the next person. Probably, some of my injuries came at a time where thought I was about to play some of my best footy. But the toughest part for me was probably some of the anxiety around playing footy and, that pressure of performance and probably not being able to handle that. That looking back was really challenging. I guess I wish I had been more proactive in trying to find ways to deal with that. And that was all, the pressure and expectation I put on myself to perform at a high level. I think that had an effect on my playing ability for a few years. And, seeing what young players go through now and, I commend them. They're really proactive, a lot of them, in dealing with that anxiety around performing. And, I probably didn't do that when I was playing. So that was probably the hardest thing, to be honest. And obviously missing out on the 2010 flag, for selfish reasons. You would love to have been out there. Absolutely, the priorities, the club wins, and you share in that celebration of victory. But on a personal level, it would have been great to have been out there and been out there with a number of players that I'd played a lot of footy with. But they're probably the few things that jump to mind.
How do you think you would have gone with, if you were still playing AFL football, how would have you gone entering a hub and playing football in a hub?
You would have done it. I mean, I don't think we should be putting players or the game up on a pedestal because they've got the opportunity to move to another state and continue doing what they love. Would have done it. Wouldn't say it would have been easy, but you navigate your way around the challenges. And, I think if you offered any Victorian a chance to maintain their employment, be it in football or some other field, but they're going to have to move interstate to do it for 6 months, I think everyone would jump at that chance. So, we're thankful that they're still playing and there's still footy on the TV. But I think most people, that have been lost to the game would have done anything to have been a part of it this year.
How do you think that the draft for this year and the draft in the next couple of years will be affected by the fact that there's been no state league football, so there's been no TAC Cup this year or the NAB under-18s? How do you think that that will affect the overall players draft this year, especially with the list sizes also being cut, possibly?
It'll probably have some effect. I mean, I think the quality will still be there. I guess the challenge will be for clubs and recruiters. They're going to have to go on a lot of historical data. They're not going to have a lot of current evidence around players, but, clubs track players for a number of years. So I'm sure almost 12 months out, 18 months out, there's a rough idea of who's going to go where anyway. So I think the initial one, this coming draft, will be a little bit compromised, but not heavily. And then moving forward, I guess, is the great unknown, depending on what football looks like next year and where the COVID situation falls. Hopefully things are back to somewhat normality. But, I guess, again, footy clubs invest a lot of money and resources into recruiting, and they're tracking these players for a number of years. So I don't think it'll be as compromised as what most people think.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. What has it been like, of course, with your job as the development coach at Carlton before COVID-19 hit? What was it like watching Tom De Koning, and how has he been playing as a ruckman?
Yeah, well, he's another young player who, you enjoy watching. You can just see the raw talent that he's got. And, like a lot of young tools, he had to work really hard on his game in different areas, but he's done that. He's so athletic, he's so raw, he can take a mark, he can do things that, not many players can. And I think he's going to have a really bright future ahead of him. I would have been nice to see him play a little bit more footy this year. I think, it would have been important just setting him up for the coming seasons to play more footy. But, unfortunately, because Matty Cruz is retired, I guess, fortunately for Tommy, that might open up some more chances for him heading into next year. But, he's a super talent, really athletic, and I think Carlton supporters will enjoy watching him for a number of years.
He definitely does have great talent. Of course, you just mentioned Matthew Cruiser. Do you have, how can you describe Matthew Cruiser and Kate Simpson? Of course, you would have, I guess, seen them around the club at the Carlton Football Club. What was it like to sort of get to know them on a personal level?
Yeah, it was, it was fantastic. I mean, Matty Cruiser, people speak about, heart and soul, and I guess him and Cade both fit into that category really well, but they've been really instrumental figures at a footy club that hasn't had a lot of success, and they've been a part of a footy club, and they've had to weather the storm a number of times. And I think that speaks to their character and their resilience. And, they're much loved figures in the football club, both extremely hard workers and preparers. And they're going to be missed. They're going to leave a really big void there. So that presents great opportunity for younger players to step up and step into their shoes. But, I don't think you should understate the careers and the impact they've had on that football club. They've both been outstanding and both fantastic people as well. Yeah,
they are two very loyal footballers. How is the resurrection of the Northern Bullets for the possibility of them playing in the VFL in the future? How is that all tracking?
It's tracking well. It's tracking well. It's look, it was shattering in a lot of ways that Carlton ended their association with the Northern Blues, and probably, shattering in a sense that it happened so quickly, and we didn't get any real time to have discussions of why and what it looks like. And basically, Carlton had their own VFL team there in the Northern Blues. The only thing that wasn't theirs was the name, but everything else was controlled by Carlton, game style, coaching, etc., etc. So it was a strange decision. And I guess off the back of that, we felt, and a few of us felt that, this footy club has so much history around it, and that history lies with the Preston Bull Ants and the Northern Bull Ants. So there's been a really impressive working group put together to see if it's possible to get the Northern Bull Ants or the Bull Ants back up and running. So far the process has gone along really well. We're really comfortable with, the strategic plan we've been able to put together. And we're really excited about the prospect of, taking the Bull Ants back to Preston where it's basically its home. That's where they live out of. That's where they operate out of. And, build that connection to the community, build that connection to our past players and people. So there's a really exciting vision there and strategic plan. We're no different to any other club at the moment trying to play in the VFL competition next year. We've got to prove that we're viable, prove that we belong. Every club's going through that process at the moment, but we're really confident we've got the right people, we've got great history behind us, and we're excited about having a really strong presence in the northern communities and hopefully playing a really important role in the pathways for young players, both boys and girls.
I guess then that sort of leads on to my next question. You mentioned the Northern Blues alignment ending with Carlton. How did you cope and get yourself back together after that difficult time?
Oh, well, as I said, I was really disappointed. I guess at the start when I got the news, I was a little bit more understanding, and the picture that was painted to me was that, very quickly a lot of other clubs are going to follow suit and there's going to be some mass fallout. I think to this day as we speak, Fletch, I think there's only been one club that has got rid of their VFL program, and that was Carlton. So that was disappointing. Because, I always felt the VFL is an integral part of any AFL club's success, and being able to build that culture underneath, develop talent. And I thought we were absolutely on the right track with that. So really disappointed the way that panned out. It took me a little while to get my head around, and I probably still haven't completely, to be honest. It still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But what it's done is it's opened up an opportunity to, help a group of people bring back the Bull Ants. And I'm not sure what Carlton's plans are with their VFL team. I guess we'll have to sit back and wait and see whether they try and run the Carlton VFL program. But again, that's something they're going to have to work through with all the cost-cutting exercises and everything else. But, for us, it's a fresh start around the Bull Ants and, trying to keep a footy club with over 130 years of history alive. So that's sort of where I've channeled as much of my energy and focus as I can.
Thank you very much for being a guest on the Footy with Fletch podcast. It has been great to talk to you today.
Thanks very much, Fletch, for having me on, and well done to you and what you're doing. All the best with your aspirations of becoming a commentator. I think you're doing a great job, mate, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you very much. So that was Josh Fraser on the Footy with Fletch podcast. Thank you to Josh Fraser for being the guest on episode 9 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. It was great to have Josh on the program. I just want to finally also say I hope that all of my listeners that are in Victoria are keeping safe during these difficult times that we are facing. So it is great to have your company. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and stay tuned for episode 10. I have a great episode lined up, so stay tuned for that.